There were signs, but I truly thought for the first time in my life, I worked so hard at something. I was so good at something. Everybody acknowledged that I was, that they couldn't fire me, that they wouldn't fire me. Even in trying to adjust to be at least more of what certain people wanted, they still fired me. Gotten some heads up. I mean, summer ago, Stephen A. sat with me, took me to lunch in Los Angeles. And he told me, he said, there's a particular executive that doesn't like you. Now, let me be honest. I had been hearing this for years, right? It had gotten to me so many times. And so having that dinner or that lunch with Stephen A. was just confirmation of it. He's like, you need to go set a meeting. But so many times, and this kid, from the West Bank, is like so accepted in New Orleans now. Like, I wouldn't change that, never. Like, all I ever wanted to do was be accepted, and want it. So yeah, like that.
The conversation on the Pivot podcast took a serious turn when Ryan Clark, Channing Crowder, and Fred Taylor finally addressed everything that happened after last Monday's shocking moment. For anyone who missed it, Ryan Clark was reportedly let go from ESPN NFL Live while the show was still on the air, and people noticed immediately because he never returned after the commercial break. As soon as that happened, word spread across social media and viewers were left wondering what had just taken place and why everything unfolded in real time. That's the reason the story exploded online, even though some people still don't realize why that specific moment became so viral. I had already shared my thoughts on the situation, and I caught some criticism for speaking about Ryan Clark getting emotional on the Pivot, which, by the way, is their own independent podcast with those three hosts and not an ESPN production. There's no denying those guys have built something successful, and the podcast is doing really well. What I keep running into, though, is people reacting to my comments without looking at the full context of what I was actually saying about him crying. One thing that stood out to me is that I don't think Ryan Clark should have brought up Stephen A. Smith's name during that discussion. When he talked about an executive not liking him, mentioning Stephen A. Smith naturally pulled him into the conversation. I didn't spend much time on that point in my original video because I knew it could become a much bigger story, so I intentionally didn't go too hard on it. During my live stream, though, where I had more time to explain my thoughts, I said straight up that mentioning Stephen A. Smith wasn't the right move. From my perspective, it almost makes it look like Stephen A. Smith was working behind the scenes on Ryan Clark's behalf. Ryan himself said Stephen A. Smith had always supported him and even reached out during previous issues. According to Ryan Clark, Stephen A. Smith told him that if ESPN reduced his role, there would already be a place waiting for him on First Take with regular appearances on Thursdays and Fridays to talk football. So by sharing that publicly, it also puts attention on Stephen A. Smith's relationship with ESPN leadership. Stephen A. Smith is under contract, and he's been open about being someone who does what's necessary for the company and for the people he works for. I've disagreed with plenty of things Stephen A. Smith has said over the years on Disney's platform, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that based on Ryan Clark's own story, he was clearly trying to look out for Ryan Clark. Stephen A. Smith's name wasn't something that needed to be brought into this publicly. Now, for everyone who keeps misunderstanding my point about Ryan Clark crying, let me explain it another way. You can say he wasn't emotional because he lost a job. You can say it had nothing to do with ESPN, but that's not how it's going to be perceived, because the only reason people clicked on that interview was to hear him talk about being fired by ESPN. That entire segment exists because of his departure from the network. The interview even brought up the idea of buck breaking, arguing that they wanted to make an example out of him, and Ryan Clark already knew what kind of message they were trying to send. Here's why I see it differently. I've been creating content full-time for 8 years. Since 2018, I've recorded hundreds of interviews, hundreds, maybe even thousands of live streams, and thousands of videos overall. When you're a creator, one thing is always true. After you finish recording, you decide what gets edited into the final video and what never leaves the hard drive. So by leaving yourself crying in the finished version, you're also showing the audience just how much that situation affected you. To some people, that sends the message that the people who made the decision got exactly the reaction they wanted. Ryan Clark spent 11 years at ESPN after already putting together a 13-year NFL career. That's a remarkable career, and there's no question he's been successful. I'm not saying ESPN didn't do him wrong, because based on everything we've heard, they handled the situation in a pretty ruthless way. We can absolutely acknowledge that and say they were foul for how everything unfolded, but at the end of the day, it's still their company. Ryan Clark even said it himself. It's a private company where employees don't make the rules, management decides what's acceptable, and executives have the final word. Maybe only a few people inside the organization were responsible for what happened, but if the people in charge give them that authority, then those decisions stand. You can criticize them publicly, respond through the media, and say whatever you want. When everything is over, though, they still have the power to end your employment. That's why I don't think showing that level of emotion in front of the entire world helped, because it also showed how much the situation impacted him. It almost reinforces the idea that they got the final say. Was there already a plan to move on from Ryan Clark? Maybe, that's definitely possible. But let's also be realistic. These decisions usually come down to business, ratings, and money. If someone is delivering undeniable viewership, companies usually find a way to keep that person around. That doesn't mean Ryan Clark wasn't a great analyst, because those are two completely separate conversations. Whether someone is the best analyst in the business is subjective. You can be the best analyst in the business, but if the company decides you're replaceable and believes someone else can deliver similar results, they'll move on from you if they think the ratings aren't strong enough. That's just how the business works. Now, I'm not saying Ryan Clark wasn't producing good numbers. I'm not saying he wasn't valuable, and I'm definitely not saying he didn't earn his spot. But from the company's perspective, they may have simply decided the return wasn't worth it anymore. Maybe they weren't happy with some of his discussions around black issues. Maybe they had concerns about certain opinions he'd shared.
Maybe there were people inside the company who just weren't on board with him anymore. At some point, they could have looked at the situation and thought, we can replace him. That's corporate America. Everyone is replaceable. And this isn't me questioning Ryan Clark's talent. I'm just talking about the reality of how businesses operate. I'd rather tell you the uncomfortable truth than say what people want to hear. Now, a lot of people keep saying my comments are really about calling Ryan Clark weak. And yes, I do think showing that level of emotion publicly wasn't the right move. The reason I say that is because the Pivot podcast is already a major platform. Ryan Clark, Channing Crowder, Fred Taylor, and the entire team have already built something successful. If they wanted to, they could continue growing that platform without ESPN. Ryan Clark could have launched his own YouTube channel the very next day. He could have posted his first statement, introduced a brand new channel, and invited everyone to follow him there. With the attention surrounding his departure, I honestly believe he could have gained hundreds of thousands of subscribers almost immediately. That's the kind of promotion people can't buy. Instead of letting the moment define you, turn it into an opportunity. Look at it as free exposure. ESPN firing you in such a public way put an enormous spotlight on your name. Use that momentum to build something that's completely yours. On top of that, Ryan Clark already has a respected name in sports media. He already has an audience. He already has the Pivot podcast as another platform. He's reportedly earned millions working in media, so he's starting from a position that most people who've lost a job could only dream of. He also has something almost nobody else has, a network filled with high-level relationships built over years in the NFL and sports media. Those connections are worth more than most people will ever have access to. That's why, from my perspective, this wasn't the end of the road. The foundation was already there for the next chapter. So when I saw all the emotion in that video, I just couldn't relate to it. To me, it felt like the situation was presented as if everything had fallen apart, and I don't see it that way, because the decision to record those moments and leave them in the final edit was intentional. That's why I wanted to explain my position after people started pushing back. This has never been about personally attacking Ryan Clark.